It will feature Gina Belafonte as our keynote speaker. We also will honor Harry Belafonte, her father, and Danny Glover, which were all activists and very involved with the legacy of Robeson. They used Robeson as a model for how they conducted a lot of their activism and really their introduction into how to use the arts to bring about social justice and change. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But we also have, in the beginning of the week, we have bus trips that we're going to be going to Princeton, New Jersey. It's like a freedom ride. So we're going to say, get on the bus and go up to Princeton, where Robeson was born. And we are also going to Harlem, New York. We're going to be visiting his family church. And so all of this information is on our website as we continue through the week. And then on Friday, April the 14th, we will be back in Philadelphia doing a street renaming right there at 50th and Walnut, where the Paul Robeson House and Museum is located. We will be renaming the street after Paul Leroy Robeson. So I know this sounds so exciting. Again, I'm going to encourage you to go to our website, which is paulrobesonhouse.org. paulrobesonhouse.org is our website. You'll go there, you'll see all the activities, register, sign up, call us. And also today, this will not be an interactive interview because we have a short time and we just want to get up close and personal with Gina Belafonte. But we're going to ask if you can put your comments or questions into the chat. And then if we have time at the end of the interview section, we'll try to get to some of those questions. Okay, we are ready to begin. I'm going to start by introducing our interviewer. And some of you know her. And so I present to some and introduce to others, Sherry Lee Howard. Sherry L. Howard, is a storyteller, a writer, a researcher. She has a long writing career. She was a reporter. She was a reporter, but once a reporter, always a reporter. She's an editor for a newspaper in her hometown of Macomb, Georgia. She's a Southern girl like me, and in Raleigh, North Carolina. And then she also had her career here in Philadelphia. Before leaving her final job at the Philadelphia Inquirer, she began going to auction houses in search of African-American art that she could afford. She did her own collection of art, and she also has published a book, and the book is about auction finds, and her book is titled Art with a Heart. So I'm going to repeat that. She has a great book out about how you can do your own collection of great art, and it's called Art with a Heart. Both are about her experiences at mom and pop auction houses, where she brought her artwork to here. Many of the artists in Sherry's collection are Philadelphia artists with little name recognition. She felt it was her duty to write about them and to give them a presence on the web and to have their talents acknowledged. Recently, she has been writing in Wikipedia articles about these artists to give them even more exposure. She is a past president and treasurer of the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists. Sherry is a super volunteer, which means she volunteers like she's getting paid at the Paul Robeson House and Museum. And she is now in charge of the publicity around the 125th birthday celebration and fundraiser.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sherry Belafonte, and then we're going to go right into the interview.
Gina Belafonte.
Gina Belafonte.
Not her sister.
Gina Belafonte, forgive me. Gina is an artist, activist, organizer, producer, and director. The baton has been passed and graciously held. Gina Belafonte is an award-winning producer, director, actress, educator, prison abolitionist, and a freedom activist, co-founder of Sankofa.org. I want you all to remember that, and please go to the website Sankofa.org. Gina has been using art as a tool for over 25 years to communicate messages of hope and civic engagement. Since its creation in 2013, Sankofa.org has been on the front lines and at the intersection of art and activism, organizing thousands to stand up for justice. As one of the lead organizers, Gina helped create one of the largest marches in U.S. history as the Women's March in Los Angeles. She was the co-chair, the MC, and the producer of that event. And a lot of us remember that being publicized on TV. One of Gina's favorite things is collaboration, and she has contributed to and partnered on many projects with artists such as Whoopi Goldberg, Alfred Woodard, and Billy Porter, and the list goes on, to name a few. Her leadership at Sankofa.org has led to some of the largest voting campaigns in U.S. history. Gina quotes that art has a unique way of opening hearts and minds, giving audiences an opportunity to see themselves reflected in the art itself. Art not only shows the world as it is, but as it could be. What a great quote. And now we begin our interview with Sherry Howard and with Gina Belafonte. And happy Black History Month, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you. And also happy Women's History Month.
Yes. That's right. Women's History Month. That's what I meant to say. I'm sorry.
Know.
Women's History Month. Black Women's History Month.
Well,
we're
you know,
talking about.
Yeah, I feel that they all should be honored throughout the year. Forget about
Agreed.
So Gina,
a month.
Yeah. So Gina, I'm going to ask first about what most of us are thinking. How's your father doing? He's like 94 something now. You know, he led a wonderful life and made it possible for us, the two of us, to sit here as Black women and talk to each other and everybody can listen. So how's he doing?
Well, he's hanging in there. He's 96. He just had his 96th birthday in March. Okay. And, he's definitely, going gracefully, I'll say. His mind is still very much with us. So, when I call and get an opportunity to chat with him, he is still very much mentoring me and telling me how proud he is of the work that we've been able to accomplish together. And so he's doing all right. And I thank you so much for asking. He is such a student and mentee of Paul Robeson. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he also is just so grateful for all who are choosing to carry the baton forward and the mantle forward. And, they carved such a path for us all. And so when we walk that path, he's in glory and feeling really good about us all.
So what do you think would be, maybe he mentioned this to you, does he see as his legacy? What has he left behind for us? He sort of talked about it right there.
Well, I mean, aside from an incredible catalog of music and an incredible film and television career, I think one of the big things that he left for us is for us to take a deeper look at the intersection of art and activism and how we can not only approach certain issues or campaigns with an artistic lens, but also those who are of note, how they can use their platform to engage audiences and to shine a light on issues where some may never have been in the path of a deeper understanding. So people with an audience and people who have a lot of followers, they can use their platform to influence and to inform and educate.
And also that platform doesn't have to be universal. People can just sort of walk out their doors and see what's going on, and they can use that little piece to change what's going on in their neighborhoods or in their lives.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think all of us have a platform, even if it's just with our own families. Mm-hmm. But we have neighbors and we have community. And I think that, for my father, one of his femtors was his mother. And she would say to him, if you haven't done something today to combat the injustices of the world, then you've missed an opportunity. And so I think we all have an opportunity to engage our community, our loved ones, to have tough conversations. One of the beautiful things in the legacy of Dr. King is nonviolence and the practice of nonviolence, and the idea that you can suspend your first judgment so that you can have these tough conversations, because in many of our families across the world and the country in particular, there are mixed views on issues. And it's important for us to stay in love with each other and be able to have conversations so we can have a deeper understanding of each other's perspectives. That's I think, a way in which healing can take place, because there's so many layers,
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Sankofa and why you and your father thought this was a necessary organization to start. And it sort of builds on some of the things that Paul Robeson stood for too. Talk a little bit about Sankofa and the impact it has had.
Sure, absolutely. So we had founded another organization that dealt with the issues of child incarceration, youth incarceration, and galvanizing the community to that issue, and young people in particular. And in that process, we saw a lot of young artists that wanted to talk about the issue. And so my father gathered all of the sort of elders, shall we say, of the community. And one thing I'd like to do, which I usually do before we begin, is always invite the ancestors and acknowledge the ancestors. It's so important that we acknowledge those who have come before us, who have paved a way for us, who are no longer with us physically. But with that said, my father did a gathering of elders of the community. And at that, and I mean, everyone and anyone of note in the, potentially, I would say, in the ecumenical community, in the activist community, in the artist community. I mean, we really gathered a bunch of people together. And we talked about the issues of our young people and the issues of mass incarceration, the issues of juvenile incarceration. And my father very quickly understood that the need to communicate and coordinate really was in the hands of our young people. So we did that, and we went from community to community. And then with that, we discovered that there was a lot left on the table as it related to artists in the community who could really make a noise. So when Trayvon Martin was murdered, we galvanized some artists to go down to Florida and to meet with some young folks who had chained themselves to the governor's desk in protest around the arrest of the suspect of the murder at the time. And that grew into becoming the Dream Defenders, who are a wonderful collection of college students and young people in the state of Florida. And they have now expanded throughout the world, who fight injustice. Well, we kept thinking, well, we really want to bring artists together. We want to bring artists together in a way where we can give them some mentorship, give them an opportunity to understand that they can have a voice, give them a way in which to more deeply articulate their voice and connect with activists that spoke to the issues that were authentically on their hearts. And my father and I and Raoul Roach, who is the son of Max Roach, had a group of our initial artists come together, and we had a conversation about how can we use our platforms as artists? How can we develop and create cultural content that can shine a light on issues around mass incarceration, around immigration, around income disparity? And then we took on the overall banner of violence as well, because we thought, well, there may be some artists that want to talk about the climate or domestic violence. And so we took on the banner of violence in order to be able to leave ourselves a space to look at those issues and find cultural ways in which to address them. So that is the way Sankofa was born. And our motto, which is "Artists are the gatekeepers of truth," comes directly to me through my father. And he said that in a session with Robeson, this is something that Robeson said to him. So I hold it very dearly. I take it very seriously. And I'm also deeply honored and grateful that my father has passed this institution off to me to lead, because I too am an artist, and I have been, I've been an activist for quite some time, but I'm so grateful that I have a platform and a space to.
It is.
Oh, I think we have some mics that are open.
Vacuum yesterday. Hello.
I think Regina's mic is open. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I feel grateful to have had this platform to collaborate with other artists and to deepen our community's understanding of so many deep, very important issues.
So talk a little bit about when your participation in your father's activism when you were younger. How were you involved in any way in his activism?
Oh, yes.
How
Well, certainly.
And how? Yeah.
Well, in our home, since I was a child, my parents had meetings and parties and dinners with many activists and artists that they would galvanize and bring together. When I was, I don't know, geez, really young, still single digits, my mother would have me come and sit around the table with her and other organizers to, in those days, lick stamps and lick envelopes to spread the word, to get messages out. She would take me out into the neighborhood where we would what we call paper the neighborhood with flyers and notices. So at a very young age, I was sort of indoctrinated into the process. I always laugh because when I was in my mother's belly, she and my father went to the inauguration of John Kennedy. So I feel like even in utero, I was in process and being groomed for activism. And then I became a teenager. And while I personally wasn't really hitting the pavement so much, my parents still included me anytime my father, was off to a meeting that I could be included in, or an event where I could, where that might capture my attention, I was included. And I was also privy to many conversations and gatherings, as I said earlier, in my home, where Dr. King came through my home, Julian Bond came through my home, Fannie Lou Hamer, and so many others that were part of the civil rights movement. My aunt, my father's sister, my Aunt Shirley, lived with us for a time, and she was a snicker, as I call them. She was part of SNCC. And so I had it all around me all the time. I think also, my father had a certain level of success. And so we also had people who worked for us in our home that did domestic work around our home. And I also witnessed the way in which they were treated and the way in which they were included. And that even in our own home was a way in which my parents brought us closer to understanding more deeply our moral obligation and our ethical obligation to the world and to people.
And you mentioned a little bit about your mother as an activist. Talk a little bit about her, because you always hear about your father and his activism and his relationship to Robeson and Dr. King. Talk a little bit about your mother.
Well, my mom is a fascinating Russian-Lithuanian Jewish young woman from the Lower West Side of New York City. But at a young age, she went to the High School of Music and Art. She was there for art, and she dropped out. She got her GED, and she joined the Catherine Dunham School, where she was a student there for many years and then became a teacher there. One of her students was Marlon Brando, strangely enough, as a drummer and a dancer himself. And then she joined the company. So my mother was the only white member of an all-Black dance company in the 1940s and 50s, which was radical in itself. I don't think my mother thought she was doing anything extraordinary. She just wanted to be a part of the soul and the vibration of the Dunham School and the Dunham technique. So when she met my father, she was already a very political person. Her parents were communists. They were, proclaimed communists. They really believed in the the origins of communism and socialism. They really believed that people should have equal opportunity. And so once my parents got together, my mother was very deeply ingrained in the civil rights movement, right by his side. She became very close friends with Fannie Lou Hamer. She was on the trip when my father was able to afford an opportunity for SNCC and others and SCLC members to join each other to go to Africa and have an opportunity to be on the ground in a place where, there were African Black people that were heads of state. So this was a new experience for many of our African American organizers here. And my mother also was very much in charge of organizing many of the fundraisers that we had in our home. I mean, of course, my father, in many ways, because of his platform and his artistry, was the shill, but my mother was an organizer. And my mother often had, people come over and organized around political campaigns, around getting certain people elected. And she was one of the first New York State delegates for Shirley Chisholm when she ran for president. And she has remained an exceptional political person. She's now 94. And even all through the Obama campaign, she was tabling in her neighborhood and remained very active.
Is there a story of, I know Robeson was a mentor to your father. Are there any stories or particular stories that he would tell you about meeting Robeson or how important Robeson was to you? Because sometimes people just have favorites like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there were many times where my father would talk to me about Robeson and, of course, turn me on to his incredible legacy of art and his films and his music. His music, he had he has that tone that goes straight inward into a person, and a beautiful majesty. I hate to use the colonial word, but he had such a majesty of presence and what he stood for. And my father ensured that we all knew his challenges, his struggles, and the fortitude, and how he continued to remain extremely relevant in our household and many of our friends' households to this day. Well, there's one in particular that I love because I always loved the early days, because I started out in the arts as a dancer and then moved very quickly into acting because I didn't want to be a dancer.
Okay.
And so the early stories of my father's, coming of age at the American Negro Theater, and then just soon after at the dramatic workshop at the New School, there's great stories that he told me. And of course, there's one in particular when he talks to me about how, one of the shows they were doing was Sean O'Casey's Juno and the Paycock. And in the audience, there was Robeson. And he learned that was one of Robeson's favorite plays, and then got the opportunity to sit down with Robeson, with other young artists from the American Negro Theater. And that was the early days of his orientation. He was in his young 20s. And I think that much of the things that my father did as he was coming of age into his own success were based in many ways around Robeson's work. I mean, my father didn't have that, that kind of presence that Robeson had. But his early musical ventures, he sang jazz for like 2 seconds and realized that he was just not a jazz singer and he was going to leave that to the jazz singers. But he gravitated toward the music of Leadbelly and Woody Guthrie because he felt that in folk music, there was an opportunity to tell a story, and a story of the people. And the celebration in the music of the challenges is such an interesting dichotomy. And so my father then even more deeply began to learn of the music from his own lineage. He grew up on the island of Jamaica and was able to delve deeper into the music and the folklore of Jamaica. And then that's how he created his own sort of like world music style. But I think he looked to Robeson as, the sparrow, as the beacon of moral integrity and ethics, and really shaped much of his work knowing that Robeson had an eye on him and that he too had a responsibility to ensure that the legacy of Robeson would continue. And that, excuse me for 1 second, I'm so sorry. I have a little puppy who is, hi everybody, this is Matilda, named after one of my father's songs. But he had a responsibility to ensure that, Robeson's passing of the baton was held in a very authentic way, but also that his legacy was preserved in that way.
Yeah, and you grew up in an activist household. You didn't have to become an activist yourself. Why did you?
Well, that's an interesting question. You say I didn't have to, and that depends upon who you talk to, because my conversations with my higher self understood very early on that it wasn't a matter of choice.
Okay.
It's actually what freed my soul. It's what helps me wake up in the morning and be able to look in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
I was never forced by my parents at any moment to do any of the things that I do. I do them because I have a deep conviction for justice.
Mm-hmm. So we're in some real difficult times now. So do you think that we still need to be as activists as Robeson, your father, were in the past, even though, for some of us, life has gotten a little better? Or do you think it has? There's a debate among some Black folks that, no, we haven't progressed, and something that we have. Is activism just as important now as it was when he and Robeson were coming up?
Yes. Well, what I'll say is progress is not a monolith, right? I mean, of course we've progressed. Of course, there's a lot of things that have enabled us to move more freely through the world, have given us opportunity to vote. But as we can see the state of the world currently, we have to do everything in our power to ensure that none of that progress is repealed. Mm-hmm. We need to be louder than ever. We need to have multiple Robesons and multiple Belafontes and multiple Ruby Dees and Ozzie Davises and multiple people and folks not feeling the fear of standing up and demanding justice be served. I mean, that's why I have such an affinity for Benjamin Crump. And for people like Angela Davis and Sonia Sanchez and so many people whose voices will remain constant in our waves. And then I look at young people coming up loud and clear: Philip Agnew, Aja Monet, Reverend Pastor McBride, Michael McBride up in Oakland. There's just so many people all over the world and all over this country that are working very hard, and we're working locally, we're thinking globally. There's so much to do. And we need to break down silos. Whether or not we collaborate on projects together or not, we must learn more deeply of each other and what each other is doing so that we can uplift and shine a light for everybody's work. Mm-hmm. And whether you're a young, I think of March for Our Lives. I think of those young people that came together after that horrific shooting in Florida, and to this day have not taken a breath. They have not stopped. They want to ensure that there is legislation passed around the protection around gun violence and gun ownership and the use of guns in this country. Mm-hmm. And it is their example that we must continue. And whether they know it or not, they too are holding the legacy of Robeson. They're holding the legacy of all those who have come before them, whether we know them or not, who have allowed examples being passed down through generations for us to, take those roadmaps and create new pathways forward.
So why did you decide to participate in Robeson's 125th birthday celebration here in Philadelphia?
Why, you say?
Yeah. Why did you decide? Exactly.
Well, first of all, it's an honor to be included in such high esteem and to have the opportunity to be a keynote. I mean, that's a huge honor. And I'm going to get a little emotional. I think because it's deeply important for us to carry his legacy forward. And in his legacy lies my father's legacy. And in my father's legacy lies my legacy. And in my legacy lies my daughter's legacy. And I always think there's that great saying that people, and I'm going to mess it up, but that people say, like, you know, in 35 years and 50 years, when our children are talking to their children who are talking to their children, and they're talking about this history and what happened during this time, where are you going to fall in that history? Mm-hmm. What are they going to be able to say about what you did and how you participated? And I want to ensure that I am, along with many, many others in the pages of history, about wronging the rights of this crazy experiment we call America, and that we make sure that Robeson never is lost in our history, in our history books. He is part of our critical race theory. Mm-hmm. He is very important to the legacy of so many writers who are fighting to ensure that we have our correct history being taught to our young people, of whatever race or whatever country they may be in. Mm-hmm. And so having the opportunity to support the Paul Robeson House, for me, is an honor and a privilege.
To us too. We're very, very happy you decided to do that. I just have one other question is, tell us something about your father that most people don't know, that you can share. That's my last question.
Well, he was a great cook.
Oh, is that right?
He was a wonderful cook, and he taught me a lot of the recipes that I know today. And he also...
I have to ask, what was his favorite dish? His best dish?
Well, I would say smothered pork chops.
Oh, love. Well, I don't eat pork. I love it when I used to eat pork.
I mean, I don't really eat very much pork anymore myself, but I've taken the recipe and put it on chicken. So yeah,
turkey chops. Yep.
And he also was a really, really, really good water skier.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. Never would have guessed. That's great. So anything, those are my questions. Anything you'd like to add?
No, I mean, thank you so much for this opportunity and to be able to, support this this webinar and to be able to meet you and talk with you. And I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you. We are, like I said, happy that you decided to. And I love talking to you. You sound what I expect your father to be. I never met him, but full energy, very welcoming and very, very friendly. I appreciate that.
So much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. So Janice, do you have any closing remarks? I guess she must have left. Okay. I don't think
I'm still here. I'm still here. I just couldn't take myself off of mute. I am not going anywhere. This was fantastic. This was absolutely fantastic. Gina Belafonte, thank you so much. I also expected you to say the reason why I was here is because Janice and Ajay was calling me every day. We were pestering you like, you have to be here. I remember you said that you thought you might be in Greece and you were kind of juggling some things around. So
yes,
we are really especially grateful that you were able to transition and pivot and be here with us.
Thank you.
April the 15th, everybody, live and in person. But this has been wonderful. Tafari, do we have any last minute questions or anything that we didn't get to? Sherry, you did an awesome job as always.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat.
Let me just tell you, we're getting that this was incredible. The comments, can't wait until April the 15th when you're here in Philly. We're getting these kind of comments, Gina. So it's been awesome.
Yes.
And are you bringing your baby with you?
Matilda.
Hilda, your little.
Yeah, tell Gina she's muted. You're muted. You're muted. Okay.
I know I was muted, but I couldn't do it myself. Someone had to help me there.
Okay.
No, well, I might bring my little puppy with me. She's really very, very sweet, and I just adore her, and I don't like to be away from her for too long. So I might just bring her with me.
Girl.
All right. Thank you. Thank you both. Any last, what's your final maybe word that you want to close out and have us think about and prepare for as we move through this 125th birthday celebration?
Well, I think for me, it's just that when people say, how can I become an activist? I always say, take a good hard look in the mirror and be very clear with yourself on what you're prepared to give up, because it's not for everybody in the marching in the streets, but there's always something that everyone can do. So you have to create your own style of activism. You have to be able to really be honest with yourself. And it could be raking your neighbor's yard. It could be delivering food to someone who can't get out and get it. It also could be organizing a group of people for a protest. It could be leading a march. I mean, there's so many different ways in which to engage. But I really hope that everyone here will, first of all, come to the event and also more deeply learn more about Paul Robeson and the challenges and the struggles and what he was up against, because that is very much of what we are now collectively up against. And it is important for us to understand how we need to come together in community in order to survive this chaos that's happening right now.
Well said. Wonderful.
Jen,
Sherry?
Yeah, I know. I saw a question in the chat. Someone asked, I'm trying to get to it, if Gina could use one adjective to describe her father, what would it be? Maybe there are too many adjectives to describe your father.
I'm going to say one, and then, of course, in about an hour, I'll be like, oh, it's just
Not right. Exactly. I always say that.
bold.
Okay, it say describe your father and Robeson's joint activism, and bold does work. Exactly. I mean, especially they were active during a time and when you weren't expected to be bold, and in Robeson's case, you get pilloried because you are. I mean, when you think about Paul Robeson and what he went through, and he didn't have to, but he felt the need to. And, for us in this day and time, we don't have to worry as much about being tossed aside as he was. And for him, so anyone like him, Malcolm, Dr. Martin Luther King, or your father, and some of the others. And, I'm glad you mentioned Fannie Lou Hamer. Those were brave, very brave people. I don't know if we could ever be that brave.
Well, it depends on what's on the line.
Yeah.
It depends on what's on the line.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, this was a wonderful, wonderful tribute to Women's History Month, Black History, which is 365 days here at the West Philadelphia Cultural Alliance and Sankofa.org, I know. So thank you all, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Blessings to you all.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Take care, Gina.
Bye-bye.